Welcome to the Antioch College Convocation and the Honorable Judge Leon Higginbotham Jr. Distinguished Seminar Series speaker, both focused on freedom to vote. I'm April Wolford, Director of Alumni Relations and alumni from the class of 1992, and the producer for this and other Zoom events for the college. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the president of Antioch College, Tom Manley, who's going to start off the convocation program. Tom?
Thank you, April. You're doing such amazing work here at Antioch, and I marvel at the fact that wherever you go, you have sunshine behind you. Welcome everyone, welcome friends and fellow speakers. Welcome to the Antioch College 2020 convocation titled Freedom to Vote. I want to talk a little bit about Antioch College's commitment to preparing students for the changing world of work, of human work, and the ongoing fight for social justice. This is an amazing time. There is for sure a big election upon us, one that matters in terribly important ways in the message that it sends and the freedom it enables. Toni Morrison once wrote, "The function of freedom is to free someone else." Voting is one of the tools of freedom, and we must use it when we can to free ourselves and to empower others to do the same. But voting isn't something we do just a few times a year. It is something we do every day in the choices we make or don't. Those choices help us uphold our lives. They are the basis for renewing our agency in the world and inspiring others to do likewise. The late Ruth Bader Ginsburg told us, "Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join." Our Antioch convocation is a collective call towards renewed activism, an activism that will plant new seeds of hope from which to grow justice. And justice is what love looks like in public, according to Cornel West. Our Antioch convocation is a call to remember and to reactivate our freedom to vote and to find the light of justice and love in the public square. To begin this convocation, this Antioch convocation, I want to read a passage from Seamus Heaney's chorus, The Cure of Troy, a version of Sophocles' original. Now, you may have heard a key line from this amazing poem just weeks ago in a speech from Joe Biden. It went something like, "Make hope and history rhyme." Now, I'm often accused of sneaking poetry into my remarks, and I'm guilty of that. However, in times of darkness and despair, we often turn to poets and storytellers because it is they who remind us and raise us through songs and tales of the past to show us what's possible. They inspire us to new activism, which is the soil and the seed of hope. It is they who help us see how to draw strength of purpose, set clearer intentions, and to summon our resilience. It is they who help us make hope and history rhyme. So here's what Heaney, channeling Sophocles, writes in the chorus of The Cure of Troy. Human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and they get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a farther shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. If there's fire on the mountain and lightning and storm and God speaks from the sky, that means someone is hearing the outcry and birth cry of new life at its term. It means that once in a lifetime, that justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. And now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Kevin Magruder. Kevin Magruder is Vice President of Academic Affairs since 2019 and an Associate Professor of History at Antioch College. Kevin began his career at Antioch in 2012 as an assistant professor. He was promoted to associate professor in 2018 when he also received tenure. A distinguished scholar and educator, Kevin holds degrees from Harvard University in economics, Columbia University in Masters in Business and Real Estate and Finance, and the City University of New York in PhD in history. Beyond his professional work as an historian, he exercises a whole wide and deep set of volunteer commitments locally, regionally, and nationally. He entered academia after many years of working in nonprofit and for-profit community development. In the 1990s and 2000s, he owned and operated 2 Harlem-themed gift shops, and he has substantial management experience. In the 10 years before entering doctoral studies, he served as Director of Real Estate Development and then Chief Operating Officer for Obsidian Development Corporation, a Harlem-based community development corporation, and then as Executive Director of Gay Men of African Descent, a New York City-based education advocacy organization. This interest in community formation led him as an historian to research including African American institutions, urban history, and gay and lesbian history, and I will say more recently, Black farming. During the 2011-2012 academic year, McGruder was scholar in residence at Schomburg's Center for Research in Black Culture of the New York Public Library, where he conducted additional research and revised his dissertation for publication as Race in Real Estate, Conflict and Cooperation in Harlem, 1890 to 1920, which was published by Columbia University Press in 2015. His scholarly work has also been published in Witness, 200 Years of African American Faith and Practice at the Abyssinian Baptist Church with Gina Ray McNeil, Quentin Dixie, and Houston Robertson. Afro-American in New York Life and History, Emancipation Proclamation, Forever Free, and with Velma Marie Thomas, and many other publications. It's been a great privilege to work with Dr. McGruder, and I now turn the mic and the video over to him.
Thank you, Tom. I want to continue Tom's message about making hope and history rhyme. And for me as a historian, I can't resist the opportunity to take a few minutes to provide a historical context for the theme of this convocation, which is freedom to vote. Like the phrase Black Lives Matter, which was coined because there's plenty of evidence that Black lives often don't matter in America, we are advocating freedom to vote this evening, just as we did in our 2018 rally, because in 2020, our freedom to vote is in danger. In the 2016 book, Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America, historian Ibram X. Kendi notes that in addition to progress in developing anti-racist policies, in American history, there's also been progress in implementation of racist policies. He notes, racist intentions, not policies, became covert after the 1960s. Old and new racist policies remained as overt as ever. And we can see the effects of these policies whenever we see racial disparities in everything from wealth to health in the 21st century. That's not to say that anti-racist reformers have not made progress in exposing and burying racist policies over the years, but racist reformers have made progress too. The outlawing of chattel slavery in 1865 brought on racial progress. Then, the legalization of Jim Crow brought on the progression of racist policies in the late 19th century. The outlawing of Jim Crow in 1964 brought on racial progress. Then, the legalization of superficially unintentional discrimination brought on the progression of racist policies in the late 20th century. And that's the end of the quote. So in the area of freedom to vote, the 1965 passage of the Voting Rights Act provided protections that ended a century of racist policies that had prevented Black voting. But in 2010, the Supreme Court, in its Shelby County versus Holder decision, eliminated the requirement for states that had a history of voter suppression to have changes in their voting laws approved by the federal government. That decision was followed by a series of voter suppression policies, from voter ID laws to the shutdown of polling places, with the advocates of the policies claiming that their intention was to ensure the integrity of the voting process. One judge noted the racist results, stating that the policies removed Black voters from the rolls with surgical precision. As Ibram Kendi noted, the intentions were covert, but the policies were overtly racist. I believe that part of the reason we are still advocating for freedom to vote is that we don't realize, or we forgot, that our vote needs to be accompanied by action. This is understandable because the dominant narrative of US history is one of progress. We often view our vote as a mission accomplished event. Our candidate won, the referendum that we supported was passed, our work is done. But if we acknowledge that progress in implementing anti-racist policies is often followed by progress by racist reformers in implementing policies that have a covert intent, but a racist impact, we will understand that voting for candidates that support anti-racist policies has to be vigilantly followed by action that will send a message to them and to proponents of racist policies that a vast majority of the people stand in opposition to racist progress. The multiracial Black Lives Matter rallies that we have seen in recent months in Yellow Springs and other parts of the country are an example of action that sends this message. They represent demands for anti-racist progress, and those voices can be linked to demands for candidates who support anti-racist policies, changes in practices that shift policing from surveillance to public safety, and the voice of the people for a range of legislation that will secure and maintain anti-racist policies at the local, state, and federal level. As in all other areas of power, in the area of racist progress, the words of Frederick Douglass continue to ring true. Power concedes nothing without a demand. When we vote and secure our vote with continued action for anti-racist policies, we protect our freedom to vote. Thank you. And now we're going to shift to highlight some Antioch students. Responding to Horace Mann's charge to win victories for humanity, Antioch students are taking action for change. Tonight, we want to briefly highlight the actions of two Antioch students, The first is Mary Evans, a member of the Antioch class of 2020. During the spring quarter, I worked with her in an independent study to develop a business plan to refine work that she was already doing in the area of audio editing. As you'll see from this profile, that work is part of a larger mission to win victories for citizens returning to the community after being incarcerated.
I got introduced to Antioch while I was incarcerated at Dayton Correctional Institution. Emily Steinmetz, who was a attending professor here, came in with like a woman's writing group, but it was based on cultural anthropology. And I had already written to like 3 colleges and got accepted to 2 of them. But then it was just something about Antioch, the passion that they had about reform, fair housing, fair jobs, you know, just giving people that are returned citizens an opportunity and a chance. I felt like this was like the best atmosphere for me to be in. I've found a couple reentry organizations and nonprofits around the area that I've been affiliated with since coming here. And that's kind of like how I essentially give back, because that's what I learned from the students and from the professors and everyone that gave their time from Antioch. Sometimes they were coming in more time than they needed to be there, wanting to return that. That's why, you know, it's important for me to like always let everyone know what Antioch did for me while I was on the inside. I've had the time of my life here. This place has saved my life. Had I not chosen this place and went to the other schools, I don't know that I would be where I am in radio, where I am educationally. I don't know that I would have learned what I've been learning here. Yeah, I learn something new here every day, whether it's about myself or someone else. So I never take it for granted.
And that was Mary Evans, class of 2020. The next student we will hear from is Chris Chavers. Chris is a member of the class of 2021. During his time at Antioch, he founded the Black Student Union, served as co-chair of Community Council, and is the student representative on the Antioch Board of Trustees. Chris Chavers.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for your amazing and powerful message that you were sending to us. There's so many things to say, especially within this time and what's going on. And I think where I'm at is that I've realized in this life, you know, we don't need all the luxuries and all these things that are granted to us that we live within America. Capitalism, consumerism, and consumption are, to me, the 3 thriving industries and complexes that run this country. And for this country to operate in the way in which it does, for capitalism, consumerism, and consumption to maintain, you need racism, and you need exploited labor, you need oppression, you need policing, you need redlining in cities, you need private healthcare to not approve of Black and brown people, you need Black women dying on operating tables, you need free labor in the prisons of Black and brown people, you need food deserts, you need the lack of funds and education in Black and brown neighborhoods, you need to be able to make sure that an officer is only indicted of the endangerment of the neighbor that he killed a Black woman of. You need the constant destruction of marginalized people's lives at every and all costs to sustain what we know of this nation to be. And so when it's asked of me of what I could possibly want out the government and what does justice, what does equity look like, what do we do? I say to the founders of the settlers of colonialism and the continuation of the stolen land that we still occupy, for justice, for equity, you give back the land in which you have stolen from indigenous peoples. You give the reparations to Black folks for not just of the years of marked slavery, but the still and very present slavery Black folks are under. You take away ICE, you take away these detention centers, you give essential field workers livable wages, you give all people free healthcare, you give all people free voting rights. You defund the government until we make something better than what we call democracy, because there has been nothing democratic demonstrated in the history of Western colonialism in America. And I do say you defund the police, and the attacking of the Black and brown and indigenous folks here have to end. You know, I don't think I have enough time to really contextualize all these questions in depth, but I think it's time in America we get fully uncomfortable We put away the luxuries and all the things that we've had, the comforts and the consumptions and the conveniences. And if what we are trying to do is to recreate something within a system that is systemically working against Black and brown people, we will never know what it feels like to be free. And I've lived on this earth for 23 years. And for my time being on this earth, I have not felt free. And we deserve to be free, and we deserve the same accounts that our counterparts get. We deserve to sell CDs, and we deserve to lay in our beds without being shot. We deserve to praise in our church without being shot. We deserve to eat Skittles. We deserve to buy and do whatever we want to do within a Walmart that happened in Inglewood. We deserve the luxury of these things. And I want to say something of a quote that James Baldwin had said, and to be a Negro in this country and to have conscience to be in rage at all times. And that is where I'm at. I'm at a rage, but I'm also at a level of empowerment. And so to anybody on this call and on this Zoom right now, I want you to feel empowered. I want you to be able to fully demand what it is that is necessary for us, not to survive in this country, because we deserve to do more than survive, but to live. And so that is where I will leave you all with, and the revolution will not be televised. And so to bring our next speaker, an amazing colleague and Board of Trustee member, Shadia, class of 1996. And she's an educator, a lifelong anti-racist organizer, and I want to introduce her and welcome you all to her.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for your words. It is often necessary for us to hear, and I'll call you young people because I don't call myself in that bracket anymore. I really try though. Because the urgency and the rage and the anger in your voice is ancestral, and it carries deep roots, and it might show up as you as an individual, but it is both necessary and impactful for all of us. So you're a carrier of that message, and we honor that message. I wanted to start today. My name is Shadia Alvarez. I'm class of 96, like Chris said. I am a proud Antiochian. There is no institution on this planet that I love more than Antioch, because of who Antioch is, because of both our mission and our tensions, both because of what it is that we believe in and our struggle to actually live up to those beliefs. I am an engager in the difficult. I am a walker of the fine lines. I am a warrior for justice because of what I learned at Antioch. And today I feel honored to both introduce our distinguished speaker, but also share with you a little bit about the legacy of Judge Leon Higginbotham, someone who inspired us at Antioch in so many ways, and who sometimes, you know, are the folks that have walked our path or have set our path for us. Sometimes we forget their names. And so being able to say their names and who they are help us also to not give up hope, especially after you watch such a treacherous debate as most of us did last night. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Honorable Leon Higginbotham, and then I want to walk you through where we're going next. And so Judge Leon Higginbotham was the son of a maid and a factory worker. He was a product of a segregated public schools, and he passed in 1998. Before he passed, he received the Medal of Freedom from President Bill Clinton, not only because of his writing and the honor that was bestowed on him, but also because of the amazing work that he did to undo structural racism. The fact that he poured his life and legacy into doing writing and briefs and policies that today we don't even think about. That was the work of Leon Higginbotham. And so I'll read a little bit. Judge Higginbotham was a chief judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, the only third African-American to direct a federal circuit court. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, in 1995. Judge Higginbotham's work extended internationally. Nelson Mandela said, "His work and the example he set made a critical contribution to the course of the rule of law in the United States and a difference in the lives of African Americans and the lives of all Americans. And his influence crossed borders, but it had the seeds here in Yellow Springs, planted at Antioch, a place where he could ask those difficult questions. Why is the law written in this way? Who decided this? These were the questions that we Antiochians ponder. And one of the things is that Higginbotham, when he came to Antioch, on the day he entered, he also entered with another Black student. And that Black student was Martin Luther King's, who then was wife, Coretta Scott. And so, and I think, Chris, about what you're saying, the connections also that we Antiochians make in the process of movement building. Our work is not just to go to college. It's actually to become part of a movement that spans generations. And so that's the work, the Distinguished Speaker Series came out of how do we not just uplift leadership that is courageous and fearless, that has resolve and tenacity, but also how do we support the sustaining of leaders that can evidence those qualities and those characteristics. And Shannon T.L. Isom is one of those. Now, for those of you that are not part of my generation, I will tell you that there's a song, Chris, help me out here. There's a song that I always think about when I hear Shannon's name. And Shannon's gonna laugh when I say this. It's a song by a singer called Sierra. Mila, I see you. Help me out here when I say the song's name is Level Up, Level Up, Level Up. And I won't go into the song. Y'all can look that up on your own. But when I think about, Mila, you are not too old for that song, baby, please. When I think about Shannon, I think about, separate just from her professional and career, and I'll share a little bit about that for you, but I think about a trailblazer. I think about somebody that is walking a path. I think about someone that is moving the noise out of the way so that we can all focus on what really needs to be. I think about somebody that is able to, in the most loving and grounded way, ask us to do more, speak more, be more. And that is not easy, folks. Those of us that have been courageous warriors know that when you are that, it comes at a price at times. And so when I think of you, Shannon, I think about that power. And I think about how beautiful it is that we can have you on the board with all of what that embodies. And so I will now read your bio.
Go ahead.
But I wanted to say that from a very personal place, because being a leader and a leader of color and a woman in today's world is difficult. Not to say that anybody else isn't, but you all on the Antioch quilt know what that is. So Shannon T.L. Isom is the president and CEO of YWCA of Dayton. Isom is responsible for the executive and administrative leadership of the YWCA Dayton, which strives to eliminate racism and empower women. The YCA Dayton has played a pivotal role in shaping the Dayton region, and Isom's priority is to carry that mission and to ensure it is both a catalyst and disruptor for issues that affect women, most especially and acutely felt through the lens of intersectionality. Isom has had an extensive post-baccalaureate education from the Ohio State University School of Medicine and Wright State University Woonshop School of Medicine. She has a BS in pre-medicine, that's not bullshit, that's BS for real, in pre-medicine biology from Spelman. And she has been awarded an amazing amount of awards: Dayton Business Journal 40 on Leadership Dayton, Dayton Business Journal 50 Most Powerful Women, Better Business Bureau Top 25, Antioch College Coretta Scott King Justice Award, and the Dayton Business Journal 40 Under 40 Hall of Fame. And most recently, you have been named as the regional leader for the Dayton Business Bureau Journal. So I just, I am both amazed, excited. I hope that you all feel the warmth and the leadership. And I introduce to you Shannon T.L. Isom. Level up, level up.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. As I was when I was first introduced to Antioch, I feel like it's home. I think I leaned over maybe to Maureen and definitely to Mila for inviting me. There's not a lot of spaces when you get to be around other people that do social justice. Most of the time, we are the only one or the very few that's in the room. So thank you for having me back. And before I do anything, any speech, any talk, I have to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you allow me to set our intention and that we do that together. Good evening. As we set our intention, and I hope you do that with me, I want us to acknowledge that this is a shared space. And this is a shared space of celebration and of gathering. And in setting intention, I want you to join me in honoring those that came before us. So for me, I must honor my ancestors, whose shoulders, whose toil, and whose bodies, and the work in which I stand. I also want to honor our indigenous population who has given up of their land and of their bodies. And it is what we occupy, it is where we work, and is where we inhabit. And so as we set the space for those who came before us and honoring those that came before us for the work that we have before us, I want to make sure that I take the time to greet one by one the group that is here before me. And so if there are any freshmen on our Zoom call, good evening. This would be your first convocation. And although it may be lost in memory eventually, what you will hold on to is this lasting beginning of your best years. It is your springboard and your resting place where you've gone from mandatory schooling to higher learning. We are glad that you chose this family, the family of Antioch College. You have decided to join not only a college, not just an educational experience, not just a campus, but a movement. It is in itself a culture. Good evening to our sophomores, if we have any on the Zoom call. We are so glad you're back. You are no longer the newest family member, but instead you are our succession plan, our energetic next. You are our sustainers. And although as like the freshmen, you joined a movement and a culture, you may be coming back not quite having figured out where this movement is, and or you just may be getting the hang of the culture. But boy, how we are going to bake you, and you're already pressed in. You will look back on your days of college education and know that it was your sophomore year when you really began to breathe the air. Good evening to our juniors. If we have any on the Zoom call, we have been holding a place for you since your freshman year to walk to and through to your mission, to your leadership, your purpose. And although you may not quite be there yet, you are a part of this movement called Antioch College. You are the reflection of its culture. Don't allow daily events, daily things to take away your ability to appreciate that you are closer, you are ever so closer, or maybe you are actually already there to articulating your purpose. But no, juniors, there are miles to go before you sleep. And finally, to my seniors, if there are any here, good evening. You are summed up through our shared description, proud. There is something about the feeling of pride that when placed appropriately, it transforms and is transferred, it is kinetic, and it emotes. We look upon our seniors with pride, with a joy that is deep and it is mature, and it holds a space and a place for those that are shadowed in our forehistory, but present in connotating a generational family that is bound by social justice. We are social justice folks, walking to and through our shared purpose. And finally, for the alumni, the faculty, the staff, board members, volunteers, donors, and guests of this family, we are grateful for your time, your talent, and your trust. Thank you for your foresight, your commitment, your presence. It is truly, truly an event that you are here, that we are all right here, and that we are present. And it really is about our presence, isn't it, in this moment where we're experiencing both this celebration and that we are painfully aware that we are in a moment, that we are in this moment. And we must admit that this moment and the collection of the ones that we are have at times, because it has at times taken my breath away. It has taken away my energy, and for some, for me, which is unbelievable, my unrelenting hope, a little bit of my hope. But I also believe it is in these moments that cause us to be greater than ourselves and to refresh ourselves and to know we are moving through forces that cause us to act, to do, and to be better. We have to acknowledge, though, that we are in a grave amount of loss. That as we are sitting here, there is a loss of connection, there is a loss of our normalcy, a loss of our cadence, our processes, our social events, but more than anything, it is a loss of our impromptu connectivity that is so intrinsically bound to this college experience. There is a loss of what has been a standardized and shared college experience that has been so present for all of us, and so easily translatable to all of us from generation to generation, from class to class. This has been a profound loss. It has also been a profound loss of lives. And so we can't gather together without taking a moment to acknowledge that there has been a profound loss of lives due to COVID, due to illnesses and protests and police brutality. We know their names, we can say their names, and we know that in those names that there is grief, and that some of us, many of us, may be sitting in that grief right now, and we actually may have grief sitting right next to us, and that for some of us, just this moment on Zoom may give us a chance to escape the challenging situations that we are bound to by our families and our friends, or maybe even some of us who've lost someone. And yet, this feels like we can't escape this unretractable level of social injustices and social ills that has ensconced us. And for some of us, we have known this insidious nature of social injustice, but for others, you're just coming to the table, or you're just awakening that this too is a shared issue. But now that we are all here, now that we are all bound to the call, that in which Antioch does, it is undeniable that the disparities are everywhere. They're taking our lives, our livelihood. They're taking our talent. They're taking our community, our peace, our justice, our freedom. It is taking our dignity. There are times when you just know that you are in a moment, when events in time become so catalytic and its effects move in what feels like a new normal that undulates us between rallying cries and mocked sighs, between hate and tension to being, some of us are just quietly missioned, between vitriol and our silent acquiesce that we are all here. We are in a period when all of this is happening all at the same time, compelling us to lift our fists. Some of us are compelled to lift our voices. And yet there's some of us that are still saying, how do we do that with so many people watching, with so much political tension and with markedly drawn sides? And some of these sides we really do feel within our circle, within our families, within our communities, and we just don't know how to do it. I am a firm believer that we are made for a time such as this, that if there was any a time, it is more than this time for us to question that if there are any that are silent, especially if it speaks to our acceptance, if our silence speaks to our acceptance, that we have to know that we can no longer be silent. But this is the time. You can no longer capitulate nor internally play the tape, questioning and wondering if you have the right words or the right experience, or are you the right race or the right background, or are you the right color? Are you able to speak up and fight against racial and social injustices? Are you able to speak up for our humanity? It is time now. You have to speak. When I decided that I would do that, it brought me to an organization that bears this amazing mission, that brandishes this mission that sometimes it timidly shouts that we will empower women and we will eliminate racism and we will promote justice, peace, freedom, and dignity for all people, but knows there's so much to deal with, right? Because poverty is not popular and eliminating racism is for some much too radical. But for those of us who do the work, we know that it is must-do work, that it is arduous, it is long-standing, it has to be uprooted. But these roots of intersectionality are tough and they are hard to pull. This gender and this race and this class that are bound in a way that almost feels like it is strangling the people in which we see. And for some of us that are in this work, we feel like it's strangling us, but this is must-do work. This work of eliminating racism. So we can't be silent, Antioch. We have to choose to speak. We started here. If you all remember, we started even with us a couple years ago where we were going to press in more clearly with the Me Too movement that was introduced by a Black woman. Do you remember who said that this is enough? And then it was catalyzed by white women and millennials who conjoined and magnified their voices. And these voices, this conjoining magnified both rich and poor, urban and rural, and they lifted a voice, and then it became a hashtag and then a movement, and it shook our foundation by questioning the sexualized norms and unearthed our secrets by breaking the bonds that were normalized and that were part of our standardized professional workplace, that workplace lulled us to think that that was normal, but we hushed it in these shared secrets. And then we moved through resentment and acceptance until we women, all of us, we looked at each other and we locked eyes, and then we locked hands in our voices and we said, yeah, that's happened to me too. We have to choose to speak. George Floyd catalyzed Black Lives Matter that then tethered a generation of white and Black and indigenous and Hispanic mobilizers to demand that the boardroom, that the platforms, that the patience of our former generations were no longer applicable. They no longer could be tolerated, no longer could stand. They took to the streets, ushering in an activism that spread throughout the cities, big and small, throughout this country. And they joined hands and arms and minds and spirit across the globe to topple statues, to topple normative practices, biases, and to uproot structural racism. Our cities are segregated. They are based on race and class. education, and it results in these disparity of resources that then traumatizes whole communities. And it impacts our babies, which then grow up to be our children and our adults. And we know that the best of us is dependent on the whole of us, upon all of our voices being heard, being at the table, being in the boardroom, making decisions, making plans, making business strategies, and expecting change. We have been told that a rising tide lifts all boats, but we know better. We know that the opposite is actually happening right before our very eyes, and that segregation has led to fences of marginalization, disenfranchisement, and poverty of energy and voices, and even of people's dignities. Antioch College, we have to speak. We have reports, both old and new, existing, that inequality across gender, across race, is a call for this community to look squarely at race, at class, at gender, and to be clear that there is agency to those who set the table, who invite the one or two women or the one or two Black people to the table, and then they call it diversity or inclusion, and then it lulls us to never really address the disparities that are magnified, that we see, that if you are a person of color, or that's magnified, if worse, that if you are Black, and then it's conflated that if you are a woman, and even worse if you are a woman of color, and then worsened if you are a Black woman, and then it confines us to impoverished communities and zip code that, regardless of program delivery, regardless of how many nonprofits, regardless of intervention, that they still lag behind in all measures of trauma, of health, of violence, of housing, and even of employment and education, and that all these factors proffer into being in greater vulnerability of violence and of death. And without our acknowledgement of these things, if we don't acknowledge that there are tables being set and that these decisions are being made at tables that have little to no representation of our people, of our community, of those that we're trying to serve, and therefore strips those very communities of agency, of power, and of, bootstrap pulling, we have to choose to speak. Antioch College, we have work to do. We have to ensure that we raise up a social justice class of leadership that will change the agenda, that will change the invite list, that we have to know that this leadership will invite only those to the table that will stand for social justice by raising issues and causing disruption, by leading change, by investing in a safer culture and pressing in to our healing. So you must promise me that you will stand against racism, that you will stand against gender violence, and that you will sit at the table and demand better for our most fragile communities. And you will provide women, you will provide our children spaces that don't demand that they perform for peace or for justice or for parity. And that you will not shut your eyes, you will not quiet your voice, that your passion, that your enthusiasm, until we have changed the landscape and know that your expertise is needed, that you will not stop. In fact, you are obligated until all of this is accomplished, until justice is, until we are all free. We will not stop. Vote. Thank you.
Well, I don't like to follow Shannon in board meetings, and I think it's a low percentage ask right now. But before I do want to wrap up and thank everyone who has really made this a memorable convocation, of bringing together a call to action emphasized by Shannon's extraordinary remarks. So from April to April, and Kevin and Mary Evans on videotape, and Chris, Shadia, and then Shannon, who really, I think, laid it out for us in a way that couldn't be more urgent and inspiring. Thank you all for for participating, and everybody that's been listening in, excuse me. I want to say that before I go to just a kind of wrap up, that one of the best talks that I listened to, and I think I found this in what Shannon just said, although she didn't demand this of us, she did, which is that each of us should take a minute now, actually, not a whole minute, just not to reflect, but to resolve what action, because she talked about speaking, but she meant, and she means, what thing are you going to require, what thing are we going to require of ourselves tomorrow, tonight, based on the urgency of our situation and the requirements of justice that she has clarified. What things will you do when you go back to wherever ever it is that you need to go back to, so that we're not only humming with this sense of now in action, but that we follow through in ways that we could share with Shannon and with each other. You know, I have, as I move in further into my last year here, even greater confidence in the power of this place, of this movement college, Antioch College, to simply keep moving over the waves that get larger and try to roll it back to the beach. I think this is a place that understands how important the work is, and that the work transcends individuals, that it transcends time, and while we need, of course, resources always to operate. That's my my plug there. Send those checks to Antioch College. That this is a place that that is needed in the world, and my confidence in it is not only in its ability to somehow find the universal jet stream of attractions and have people like Shadia and Shannon and Shay Mayer, thank you Shay, by the way, on the board, or to get April Wolford to come pick up from California and come all the way back to Yellow Springs. Although right now it looks like a good move, April. It's in the students like Chris and Mary and others who seem to understand and remind us in the best ways, sometimes hard ways and difficult ways, but in the best ways, of what our obligations are as an institution and as a community. So I have great confidence in this institution. And I would say, just to close, that the Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, said, freedom is not given to us by anyone. We have to cultivate it ourselves. It's a daily practice. And social justice, fighting for social justice, is a daily practice. Thank you, Antioch. Thanks to all of you. Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Tell
Have a
you now.
fabulous school year, Antioch.
Indeed.